So we started here on Daf Kuf Tes Vav, and we're trying to figure out from whence do we derive the conclusion that Basar B'chalav is asur both ba'achila and ba'ana. And the Gemara had made an attempt to derive it from the fact that if it's asur b'bishul, then ipso facto it should be asur b'achila and ba'ana. But the Gemara is fighting that, tooth and nail. The fact that it's asur to cook it doesn't necessarily mean that, the product of that cooking is going to be asur. And we have a similar case with regard to what's called kloi zroim. And kloi zroim means when you mix seeds of two different species. And the Torah says by mixing those seeds and planting them together, that's called the toeva. That's something that the Torah prohibits. And therefore, according to the logic that we presented here in the name of Rav Ashi, that whatever is asur to do, if you go ahead and do it, the product of that isur, of that violation is asur, then we should say that after you plant these seeds, then the Torah would say you're not allowed to have hana from that which grows from the seeds. But the truth is that there are two different categories of kilayim. There's one category of kilayim called kilai zroim, and in that case you're allowed to have hana from the produce. But then we have something called kilai kerem, where you mixed, let's say, grains together with a vine, and there the product is asur b'hana, because the Torah says pen tigdash hamalea, and the word tigdash means that it's got to be burnt. It's isurei hana. And the Gemara argues that from the fact that the Torah prohibits hana in klei kerem, the implication is that in klei Yisrael there is no isur. The Gemara is not happy with that because the Gemara thinks that maybe klei kerem are also to the utmost, which means you're not allowed to even have benefit from it. You can't sell it to a guy or feed it to your dog. But in the case of klei Yisrael, maybe we go down one level, and it's a toiva at least to generate an isur achila. So now the Gemara is going to come up with a hekesh. So this is where we're up to. If you count down from the top of the Amud, you'll see approximately 12 lines down. The first word in the line is be'achila. And the Gemara says, iskish lekloi behema. Now, what's kloi behema? Kloi behema is called harba'ah, with an ayin, harba'ah. Harba'ah means when you mate two species together. Like, for example, let's say you mate one animal, you breed one animal with another animal. And we have a hekesh now between kloi zroim and kloi behema, d'chsiv. With regard to kloi behema, the Torah says, behemtecha lo sarbia kilayim, and sodcha lo sira kilayim. So notice in the same pasuk, we have both isurim. We have the isurim of the isur of mating two different species of animals, and the isur of planting two, seeds from two different species. Ma behemtcha, what do we derive from this hekesh? Hayotzi mimenu muteres, af sodcha hayotzi mimenu muter. So it means to the following, that when you breed two animals together, the vlad, the offspring of those two animals, is mutter. And if they're two kosher animals, then you're allowed to shech the offspring and eat the basar. So we see that the Torah is matir in the case of kloi behema, even as far as achil is concerned. And from this hekesh, between kloi zroim and kloi behema, which are both written in the same pasuk, we're going to derive the conclusion that ayotzi menu mutter, that you're allowed to even eat that which is produced by the kilayim of two seeds. Now, again, on a philosophical level, this is very difficult to logically to understand. I mean, why is it that if you mix, a vine with, let's say, kernels of wheat, then you're not allowed to have any hanoah from it. And the Torah says, tikda shamaleh, you got to burn it. And yet, if you mix two seeds, which you're not allowed to do, but that which grows is mutter, and you're not allowed to even eat it. The Gemara now asks the following question. Now, the premise of this that underlies this hekesh is that in klai behema, if you mix two species and breed them together, then the offspring is mutter. Klai behema gufayu minola. How do you know such an assumption? Maybe the Torah would equate klai behema with klai akerem. We saw in klai akerem pedikta shamaleh that you're not allowed to benefit from it. Maybe you're not allowed to benefit from klai behema. And the Gemara answers that here we introduce hegdesh. Mida aser achmana kloim legavoa, michlal de lehegdesh shari. Now, here we have to quote a pasuk in Vayikra, in Perkav Beis. The Torah says, Shar o kesev o eis ki yivoled v'hayoshiv asimim tachas imo umiyom hashmini v'holo yirotzek lekarbon ishe Hashem. So only when the newborn from an ox, a sheep, or a goat is 7 days old, meaning it's now begun its 8th day since its birth, then you could bring it on the Mizbeach as a korban. And the Torah goes out of its way to mention here Kesev O'ez. Kesev is a young sheep. I think it's called a ewe in English, EWE, I think. Right? Yeah. And O'ez is a goat. And, the Torah sort of specifies the O in between to separate between the Kesev and the O'ez. What's the Torah telling me? That although after the 8th day you're allowed to bring the sheep, or you're allowed to bring the goat after its 8th day, but you can't bring the sheep and the goat. What does that mean, you can't bring the sheep and the goat? Meaning if you mate the sheep and the goat, then the offspring is invalid for the Mizbeach. It's posel l'karban. And if the Torah had to go out of its way to tell you that it's posel l'karban, then it must be that it's mutter to man. Why? This is based on a sugya at the beginning of Menachos, which is called Mimashki Yisrael Min Hamutar B'Ficha, pasuk in Yechezkel. You're only allowed to bring on the Mizbeach that which you're allowed to eat. That which is prohibited from eating cannot be brought on the Mizbeach. So, for example, Chadash, you can't bring Chadash on the Mizbeach because it's also to human consumption. And here, what we're saying is if you would not be allowed to eat the product of a crossbreed of a sheep or a goat, and that would be also l'achila, then through the principle of Bimashki Yisrael, it would not be fit for the Mizbeach. But here the Torah is saying that the reason why it's not fit for the Mizbeach is because the Torah teaches this, and we derive it from the O that separates Se from Keves, or Se from O's, from A's. So the Gemara now has another case where you violate an Isur, and yet the produce is mutter. Oso v'espino litzar. What happens if you shech the mother and its offspring, and her offspring, on the same day? Then we don't know, the Torah doesn't say that you're not allowed to eat the meat of those two shchitos. So if you went ahead and you shechted the offspring, the beno of the mother on the same day, yet you're allowed to eat the basar. And that's a sugya that we have back on Davayin Ches. So the Gemara says that why is the product of this prohibited shchita mutter? And the answer is because this comes under a category in Kodshim which is called mechusar zman. Mida asar achmana mechusar zman legavoa Michlal de lehedjot shari. Right? If you bring a carbon before the eighth day of it since its birth, it's possible. And the Torah says that if you went ahead and you violated the Isser of bringing this offering, this carb prematurely, which is called B'chus Man, then it's totally Asur. And if that be the case, why did the Torah have to bother teaching me that it's Asur if it's anyway Asur Bidin B'chus Man to Achilas Hedjot? Meaning if we are not allowed to eat, let's say, the product of Oso Vespino, then for sure it would be Asur on the Mizbeach in the case of Mechusas Man. So from the fact that the Torah had to go ahead and completely exclude Mechusas Man and Kodshim, the implication is that in Hedjot, Mechusas Man would be mutter. But otherwise, we would have applied the principle of Rav Ashi that since we weren't permitted to slaughter the ben, then the meat of that slaughter would be also. Frek the Gemara, Shiluach HaKan Litzar. This is very interesting. We had it just yesterday in the parsha that the Torah prohibits you from taking the mother off of its fledglings, but rather you have to send it away. And he went ahead and he violated that Isur, and he took away. I'm sorry, and he failed to send away the mother, but rather he took away the fledglings while the mother was sitting on the nest. We'll call it the nest. And now the Gemara says, according to Rav Ashi's principle, that since it was a toeva to take the fledgling birds while the mother was sitting on the fledglings, then now we should assume and derive the conclusion that the bird itself, that which you violated, which is the mother bird, should be also. And even if you go ahead and shech the mother, you can't eat its meat. So the Gemara's answer is Lo Omer Torah Shalach Litakola. Wow, this is a mind-boggling concept. There's this is something that's so typical to a Drabanan, but the Gemara is using this to analyze a Doraisa. If you would say that the bird itself is Asur, then if somebody accidentally gets a hold of this bird because it flew away, then he would have no idea in a million years that this is a bird that's Asur. It's a kosher bird. It has all the simon and kashrus. It's the identical bird that's kosher. So you're creating a takola. You're creating a stumbling block. Omer Reish Lakish. Now we have a new shita as how to derive the Isur Hana in Basa B'cholav. Reish Lakish says, Minayin leBasa B'cholav she'asur, meaning B'hana. Talmud Lomar, Al tochlu mimenu na ubashel mavushal. This is unbelievable. We're going now to the laws of Korban Pesach. And in Korban Pesach, there's a double language. One word of those two words is Iberic, is superfluous. Because it says ubashel mavushal twice. Why? Shein Talmud lo mavushal, the Torah didn't have to say the word mavushal because it says already ubashel. Uma Talmud lo mavushal, why did the Torah then add an extra word? Lomar lecha, to teach you yesh la bishal acheres shehu kazeh. There's another bishul which is like the Korban Pesach, and that's ezu zeh basa b'cholav. And that bishul of basa b'cholav is now being equated with the Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach is Asur B'Hana. Wait a minute, let me just think about that for just 1 second. I'm not sure, but I think if I remember correctly, this is a reference to the Korban Pesach that's still alive before you shechted it. But unfortunately, I don't
Mhm.
see that here. Let me just look one more time. Sorry. Oh, you know what? I'm going to say the following, Ira. I might be
Mhm.
getting myself into trouble, but Reish Lakish now is deriving from the extra word mevushal, the Isra Achila of Basar B'cholav. Why? Because in Korban Pesach, if you went ahead and you cooked the Korban Pesach, you're not allowed to eat it. I don't think it's Asur Ba'anod. Anyway, Amalei Rabbi Yochanan, right? Rabbi Yochanan bounces back and he asks Reish Lakish, why is it that you are looking high and low for a source from which we should derive a source in the Bible from which we derive the Isra Achila of Basar B'cholav? You didn't even have to bother doing that.